What's going on, guys? Right Bomby Teacher in the house, and I'm here with my GPL Week 2 Team Builder. Your Royal Bomber for Bombies are taking on Team Agoshi, who unfortunately doesn't have a logo this week. It's not a requirement as part of the GPL to have a logo, so I've kind of improvised one a little bit this week. I do apologise for that. But yeah, as for Agoshi himself, we've never actually played before. He did play the GPL Season 0 the same as I did. Unfortunately, he didn't actually make playoffs. He had a very tough group. But he's an interesting player, builds some very creative teams, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings against me. His team, on paper, is very physically offensive. He's got a lot of very big, hard-hitting physical attackers. On the special side, not so good. His special attackers are very limited, and some of the special attackers he does have, I don't expect to come at all this week. So we're going to see what he brings. On the screen you can see his team. The 6 on the top row I think is his most likely 6 against me. The Starmie's a little debatable, but I think the rest of his 6 are pretty safe bets. Maybe the Weavile doesn't come or the Crook, but we'll talk about his team in a little bit more detail. His current kill leader after narrowly losing 1-0 last week is his Mega Morwile, picked up 3 kills last week. Really hard-hitting, physically offensive monster, gets things priority moves and things like Sucker Punch. Gets Sword Stance as well, so it can be an SD set, can be a 4 attack set, potentially can be a substitute 3 attack set. It's pretty slow, unfortunately. It's only got base 50 speed, so it can be outsped by a lot of my team, especially with a strategy that I have got this week. It can be really hard hitting. If it can't kill with things like Sucker Punch, I have a lot of mons on my team that can really shut Morwile down, so we'll see if he does bring it and what sort of set he brings. I think if I'm him, I bring a sub set, because I think sub matches up pretty well against my team. Sub SD, 2 attacks maybe, something like that. But he has a very good partner for Mega Morwile in Zapdos, which can take advantage of the ground type attacks. Obviously with Zapdos being electric flying, it's immune to those ground moves unless it uses Roost. It's a really good defensive pivot in general. Typically you see it run with a bold nature with things like Discharge, U-Turn, Defog / Toxic, depending on what you need on your team, and Roost. So I think he brings that set this week, maybe with leftovers. He could bring an offensive set to cover for the fact he doesn't have a particularly good special stat. I'm not sure about that though. I think that doesn't match up too well against some of my team. So we'll see if he does bring it, but I'm not convinced. I think he just brings a standard defensive set. Next up is one of his Z users in Crocodile. Crocodile gets a huge amount of coverage moves, things like Aqua Tail, Superpower, Dragon Claw. Gets a lot of different moves it can use a Z Crystal on, so it can be a little bit difficult to predict what he switches in. It can be a little bit hard to prep for because it's his versatility. He has some nice abilities in Intimidate and Moxie. I've run a fully physically defensive Crocodile set in the past. I think he more likely brings a Moxie Sweeper set with a Z move, can potentially even run Scarf to try and outspeed things like my Infernape. But it can struggle a little bit against some of my mons on my team. Things like the Infernape, the Hydreigon can actually put a lot of work in against it. Celebi can put on a lot of work so long as it doesn't take the Dark type hits. And of course I have Levitators on my team to be immune to the Grass type stab, things like Hydreigon and Cresselia. So I think he more likely brings a Z move set with like potentially U-turn. I think it gets U-turn, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it gets potential like coverage options. I think that's what he goes for. Next up is the biggest monster on his team outside of Morwile, and that's Darmanitan. Darmanitan has a massive attack stat, purely physical fire type with the sheer force ability. I think he brings a Scarf set on this most likely this week to outspeed my Mega Aero. I think most likely he brings like Flare Blitz, Earthquake, Stone Edge, and U-turn. That's probably by far and away his best set. He could run Banded, but then Aero outspeeds it and does a lot of work to it, so not 100% sure if he does go for Band, but those are the 2 most likely sets he brings. Next up on his team is Weavile, super good late game cleaner, really fast, really high attack stat, gets priority in Ice Shard, gets Stab Knockoff, which can hit really hard against a lot of teams. Typically it can be Life Orb or Choice Band. I think he more likely brings Life Orb. It is quite frail though, does have a few weaknesses to things like Fire, Fairy, Steel, and that quad weakness to Fighting. So it is quite situational, but in the late game when my team's worn down, it's a super powerful Pokemon to bring. Now, the last one, as I said, was a little debatable. He has 3 water types on his team. Water is actually really good against my team, so I think he should probably bring at least one of them. I think his most likely bring, if I was him, is the Starmie. Starmie can be a very strong offensive spinner or defensive spinner, gets good coverage moves in things like Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Dazzling Gleam, and Flash Cannon. It does struggle to break through especially defensive Pokemon now, and I do have a Cresselia and a Registeel, so it's a bit of a toss-up, but I think Starmie is a good option for Rapid Spin. I don't think he wants to run too much in the way of defog. He doesn't have many defoggers on his team in general. One of them definitely isn't coming this week, so... other options for water, he has Lantern, which is a fairly solid, specially defensive Pokemon. Typically you see it run with an Assault Vest set. It's a bit weak on the physical side, however, and I have a lot of ground coverage on my team, which is what Lantern is particularly weak to. So Lantern I thought was a little bit more dubious, but I think it can come, because it can kind of shut down Aragog, my Galvantula, relatively well. It can obviously provide an electric immunity with Bolt Absorb, so yeah. Interesting situation for Lantern. Galizapod's kind of like Lantern, but on the physical side. Only Galizapod's a fantastic revenge killer. It gets 2 priority moves in First Impression and Aqua Jet. The emergency exit may be a little bit of a hindrance though for Galizapod, as he is weak to rocks, takes 25%, and faster Pokemon, things like Galvantula, Aero, Infernape, can all kind of threaten him out pretty comfortably. Even things like Hydreigon can actually take a hit and hit him back pretty hard with things like Dark Pulse, especially if I run a spec set. So yeah, I think Galizapod could come if he's worried about physical offense. But I feel like he's too weak on the special side to risk staying at. Next up is Azelf as one of his other Z captain. Pretty fast, decent psychic type with decent attack and special attack. Typically you see it as a suicide lead set with things like Rocks, Taunt, Explosion plus coverage move. I expect Dazzling Gleam this week for Hydreigon. If he does bring Azelf, it's really frail on a defensive side and doesn't take hits particularly well, especially dark type attacks. I do have a couple of good dark type attackers on my team, so Azelf has a bit of an awkward matchup, but I think he might bring it just to try and get Rocks up ASAP, as Rocks can be a bit of an issue for my team, although I do have good hazard removal, so we'll see. Virizion, I think, is a bit of a hard one to judge. Virizion, decent speed tier, really good special defensive stat, can be a good potent threat offensively. Unfortunately, Virizion's not one of Agoshi's Z captains. Agoshi's actually got some interesting Z captain choices, but Virizion really hits hardest with things like all-out pummeling. Unfortunately, Virizion can't use it in this particular matchup until he changes Z captaincy around. But it still can hit pretty hard. It gets Swords Dance. It does get threatened out by quite a few members of my team though, so not 100% convinced it can afford to come, because it doesn't beat enough of my team to really justify bringing over some of his other mons. And last but by no means least is a Pokemon that I definitely don't expect to come this match, is the Swoobat. Pretty fast flying type, psychic type as well, but the rest of its stats are completely lackluster. It does get a couple of decent abilities and Simple and Unaware, but neither one of them really help out the Stealth Rock weakness or the fact that I can just hit it incredibly hard right off the bat before it sets up. It can't break through Cresselia even if it is set up, so I don't ever see a world where Swoobat comes to this match, and if it does, I think it's a pretty easy pick-off for quite a lot of my team. In terms of hazards and hazard removal, he's got 3 rockers in the form of Mawile, Azelf, and Crook. He has a Spiker in the form of Galizapod. He has no T-Spikes or Sticky Webs. For removal, he's got 2 Defoggers in the form of Zapdos and Swoobat, and 1 Rapid Spinner in the form of Starmie. So, real quick before I talk about my team, I did make some free agency swaps for this particular matchup. And obviously moving forward, I dropped Klefki and Frostlass from my team and replaced them with Florges and Registeel. This gives me some additional bulk, it gives me some wish support in the form of Florges, it gives me additional Stealth Rock in the form of Registeel, but it's mainly for the additional bulk. Neither Klefki or Frostlass have particularly good bulk, so I needed a little bit more bulk on my team because I realised I was very weak defensively. And I think these 2 Pokemon really fit my team surprisingly well. Let me know what you think about those swaps down below in the comments, or if you want to message me privately asking me about the change, you're more than welcome to. But yeah, let's talk about my team for this week. You can probably guess the first mod on my team by looking at the stats and the ability, etc. We're bringing back Wukong the Infernape this week. Rocking another physical scarf set. We bought physicals last week. Slightly different set though. U-turn, Flare Blitz, Earthquake, and Stone Edge. Johnny max attack with Scarf. This means that I outspeed everything on his team except a Scarf Weaver, which I don't ever see coming, and a Scarf Starmie, which could come, but I'm not 100% convinced. Earthquake Stone Edge covers the majority of Agoshi's team. U-turn for pivoting, of course, and Flare Blitz. This set outspeeds Scarf Darmanitan with a bit of chip damage, I believe about 25%, so basically a rock switch in. I actually OHKO with either Earthquake or Stone Edge. Stone Edge, of course, hits the Zapdos if it tries to switch in, and yeah, it's pretty strong. The only thing this Pokemon doesn't really want to take on is Crook, but I can U-turn out and do significant damage on it, even through an Intimidate. So yeah, I think Infernape's going to be a good physical breaker this week. Hopefully I can use it better than I did against 2D. I didn't use it very well then, but we're going to see what we can do. Next up on the team is going to be Aragog, the Galvantula, rocking a Sash set this week. This is my likely lead if Crocodile doesn't come. If not, I'll probably lead Infernape. We're running Webs. Webs is there to slow down any potential Scarfers, to make sure that my Infernape outspeeds, so can my Aerodactyl. Volt Switch for pivoting. Bug Buzz hits his team pretty hard. Thunder hits the rest of his team pretty hard. Obviously, the only things that can really take a Thunder are that Lantern and the Crook. The rest doesn't really want to take a Thunder very well. Obviously, with Compound Eyes, Thunder is 91% accurate, so it can hit pretty hard. He's actually surprisingly weak to Bug on this team. He's also quite weak to Ice, but wait, I couldn't fit Hidden Power Ice on this set unless I didn't run Sticky Web. But yeah, I think Aragog has a good matchup this week. It does struggle against certain matchups, but if it can get enough chip on a couple of Pokemon and get the webs up, that's pretty much Aragog's job done. Next up is going to be one of my main special cleaners this week is Hydreigon. Hydreigon did pretty well last week, baiting out the Diancie and one-shotting it with a Z-move. We're going to try the same thing again this week, only with Grandium Z. I think his most likely switch into Hydreigon is nearly always going to be that Mawile. Grandium Z Earth Power one-shots all forms of Mawile unless he's fully physically defensive, which I don't expect, or fully specially defensive rather, which I don't expect to come. Dark Pulse for General Stab hits his team relatively well. Flamethrower can hit the Mawile, can also hit the Weavile. And of course Defog to remove entry hazards. Pretty much a standard Hydreigon set with a different Z-move. I didn't really feel the need to run anything different. This is going to be a decent special cleaner, or a special wall breaker depending on what he brings. So yeah. Next up is going to be my main physical sweeper. It's going to be Pteranodon, the Mega Aerodactyl. Pretty much going to be my finishing one for the most part. But it hits his team incredibly hard. Now we're in quite an interesting position this week because barring any Scarfers, 56 speed EVs and a Jolly Nature outspeeds his entire team. So I chose to invest the rest of the EVs into bulk so I can live a little bit of hits. Or live a few hits a little bit harder. This can take hits from the Darmanitan relatively okay. It does actually one-shot with Stone Edge, which is nice. The only thing this gets outsped by is Scarfers. Earthquake Stone Edge hits his whole team. Crunch can ruin the Starmie or the Azelf, and Ice Fang's mostly there for things like the Crook. Next up is one that I debated not including on my team, but I decided to put it in this week instead, and that's going to be Ginger the Mudsdale. Working a Rocky Helmet set this week, really physically defensive. This allows me to live a hit from the Darmanitan and put it in range for Infernape or Aero to come in and sweep it. Clean it up. Earthquake, Stealth Rock, Toxic Rock Slide. Toxic can definitely wear down some of his team, particularly that Zapdos, which might think he can switch in on an Earthquake. Toxic plus Rock Slide actually does quite a bit of work on the Zapdos. Does lack on the special side, but I don't think I'll need to worry too much about that. Of course, with stamina, meaning that I get a defense boost every time Ginger gets damaged, makes this a pretty good physical wall, actually, to be fair, against his team. And last but by no means least is probably one of the best matchups against his team this week, and that's going to be Moonduck, the Cresselia. Running a bit more physically biased bulk because his team is a lot more physically physically offensive than special, but I do have a bit of special bulk on there just in case he does run things like a Spec Starmie or a pretty specially offensive Zapdos. But yeah, this job's basically to come in, sponge hits, dish out a little bit of damage, and then switch back out. That's pretty much Creselia's main job. Leftovers for a little bit of additional longevity. Psychic hits a lot of his team except the Crook and the Weavile. Moonblast hits the Crook and the Weavile. Ice Beam hits a lot of things like the Zapdos and the Crook. And Toxic, of course, to wear down a lot of his defensive Pokemon. That's going to be my team for this week. I'm looking forward to the battle. Oh, it's going to be an interesting one. I'm actually going to be battling tomorrow as of the time I'm recording this, but you'll see this up on the same day, of course. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Rabombi Teacher. I'm your coach of the Royal Bournemouth Rabombis. Stay safe, stay awesome, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.